Hana. The alarms go off just before the priest can pronounce us husband and wife. One moment, everything is quiet and ordered. The music has died down, the crowd is silent, the priest's voice resonates through the room, rolls out over the audience. In the quiet, I can hear each individual camera shutter, opening and closing like metal lungs. The next moment everything is motion and sound, shrieking chaos sirens. And I know, in that instant, that the invalids are here. They've come for us. Hands grab me roughly from all sides. Move, move, move. Bodyguards are piloting me toward the exit. Someone steps on the end of my gown, and I hear it rip. My eyes are stinging. I'm choking on the smell of too much aftershave, too many bodies crowding and pulling. Come on, hurry it up. Hurry it up. Walkie-talkies explode with static. Urgent voices shout in a coded language I don't understand. I try to turn around to look for my mother, and am nearly carried off my feet by the pressure of the guards moving me forward. I catch a glimpse of Fred surrounded by his security team. He's white-faced, yelling into a cell phone. I will him to look at me. In that moment I forget about Cassie, I forget about everything. I need him to tell me we're okay. I need him to explain what's happening. But he doesn't even glance in my direction. Outside, the glare is blinding. I squeeze my eyes shut. Journalists jostle close to the doors, blocking the way to the car. The long metal barrels of their camera lenses look for a second like guns, all directed straight at me. They're going to kill us all. The bodyguards fight to clear space for me, shouldering apart the rushing stream of people. At last we reach the car. Once again, I look for Fred. Our eyes meet briefly across the crowd. He's heading for a squad car. Take her to my house. He yells this to Tony, then turns around and ducks into the back of a police car. That's it. No words at all for me. Tony puts a hand on top of my head and directs me roughly into the back seat. Two of Fred's bodyguards slide in next to me, guns out. I want to ask them to put their weapons away, but my brain doesn't seem to be working correctly. I can't remember either of their names. Tony jerks the car into gear, but the knots of people gathered in the parking lot mean that we're trapped. Tony leans on the horn. I cover my ears and remind myself to breathe. We're safe, we're in the car, it will be okay. The police will take care of everything. Finally, we begin to move forward, plowing steadily through the dispersing crowd. It takes us nearly 20 minutes to make it out of the long drive leading down to the labs. We turn right onto Commercial Street, which is clotted with more foot traffic. Then zip against traffic into a narrow one-way street. In the car, everyone is silent, watching the blur of people in the streets, people running, panicked, undirected. Even though I can see people open mouth, shouting, only the sound of the alarms penetrates the thick windows. Strangely, this is more frightening than anything, all these people voiceless, screaming silently. We barrel down an alley so narrow, I'm positive we'll get stuck between the brick walls on either side of us. Then we turn down another one-way street, this one relatively free of people. We blow straight past the stop signs and jerk left into another alley. Finally, we're really moving. It occurs to me to try and reach my mother on her cell phone, but when I dial her number, the phone system keeps returning an error. The systems must be overloaded. I suddenly feel very small. The system is security. It is everything. In Portland, there is always someone watching. But now it seems the system has been blinded. Turn on the radio, I tell Tony. He does. The National News Service patches in. The announcer's voice is reassuring, almost lazy, speaking terrifying words in a tone of total calm. Reach at the wall. Everyone urged not to panic. Until the police can restore control. Lock doors and windows, stay inside. Regulators and every government official working hard in tandem. The announcer's voice cuts off abruptly. For a moment there is nothing but static. Tony spins the dial, but the speakers continue buzzing and popping, letting out nothing but white noise. Then suddenly an unfamiliar voice comes in, overloud and urgent. We are taking back the city. We are taking back our rights and our freedom. Join us. Take down the walls. Take down the... Tony punches the radio off. The silence in the car rings out, deafening. I flash back to the morning of the first terrorist attacks, when at 10 a.m., in the middle of a peaceful, everyday Tuesday, 3 blasts went off simultaneously in Portland. I was in a car then, I remember. When my mother and I heard the announcement on the radio, we didn't believe it at first. We didn't believe it until we saw the smoke clouding the sky, and saw the people begin to stream past us running pale, and the ash began to drift like snow. Cassandra said that Fred let those attacks happen to prove that the invalids were out there, to show that they were monstrous. But now the monsters are here inside the walls in our streets again. I can't believe that he would let this happen. I have to believe that he will fix it, even if it means killing them all. We've finally shaken off the chaos and the crowds. We're near Cumberland now, where Lena used to live, in the quietly run-down residential portion of the city. In the distance, the foghorn in the old watchtower on Munjoy Hill begins blowing, sending mournful notes beneath and beyond the alarms. I wish we were heading home instead of to Fred's house. I want to curl up in my bed and sleep. I want to wake up and find that today was all just a nightmare that has pushed through the cracks, past the cure. But my home is no longer my home. Even if the priest did not get to finish his pronouncement, I am now officially married to Fred Hargrove. Nothing will ever be the same. Left onto Sherman. Then right into yet another alley, which will dump us onto Park. Just as we reach the end of the alley, someone runs out in front of the car, gray blur. Tony shouts and slams on the brakes, but it's too late. I have time to register the tattered clothing, the long, matted hair invalid before the impact carries her off her feet. She spins across the hood, fans for a second against the windshield, and drops out of sight again. Anger crests inside me, sudden and startling, a stabbing peak of it that breaks through the fear. I lean forward, shouting, "It's one of them, it's one of them. Don't let her get away." Tony and the other guards don't need to be asked twice. In an instant, they're rocketing into the street, guns drawn, leaving the doors of the car hanging open. My hands are shaking. I squeeze them into fists and lean back, taking deep breaths, trying to calm down. With the doors open, I can hear the alarms more clearly, and distant sounds of shouting too, like the echo roar of the ocean. This is Portland, my Portland. In that moment, nothing else matters, not the lies or the mistakes, and the promises we failed to keep. This is my city, and my city is under attack. The anger tightens. Tony is hauling the girl to her feet. She is fighting, although she is outnumbered and completely outmatched. Her hair is hanging in her face, and she's kicking and scratching like an animal. Maybe I'll kill this one myself. Lena. By the time I make it onto Forest Avenue, the sound of the fighting has faded, swallowed by the shrill cries of the alarms. Every so often I see a hand twitching at a curtain, a fishbowl eye peering down at me and then vanishing just as quickly. Everyone is staying locked up and locked in. I keep my head down, moving as quickly as I can despite the throbbing in my ankle where I landed on it wrong, listening for sounds of squads and patrols. There's no way I'll be mistaken for anything but an invalid. I'm filthy, wearing old, mud-splattered clothes, and my ear is still streaked with blood. Amazingly, there's no one on the streets. Security forces must have been diverted elsewhere. This is, after all, the poorer part of town. No doubt the city doesn't feel these people need protection. A path and a road for everyone. And for some, a path straight into the ground. I make it to Cumberland without problems. As soon as I step onto my old block, I feel for a moment as though I'm caught in a still life from the past. It seems forever ago that I used to turn down this block on my way home from school. That I used to stretch here after my runs, placing one leg on top of the bus stop bench. That I would watch Jenny and the other kids playing kick the can and open up the fire hydrants for them when it got hot in the summer. It was a lifetime ago. I'm a different Lena now. The street, too, looks different, saggier, as though an invisible black hole is spiraling the whole block slowly down into itself. Even before I reach the gate in front of number 237, I know that the house will be empty. The certainty is lodged like a hard weight between my lungs. But I still stand stupidly in the middle of the sidewalk, staring up at the now abandoned building, my home, my old house, the little bedroom on the top floor, the smells of soap and laundry and cooked tomato taking in the peeling paint and the rotting porch steps, the boarded up windows, the faded red X spray painted on the door marking the house as condemned. I feel as if I've been punched in the stomach. Aunt Carol was always so proud of the house. She wouldn't let a single season go by without repainting, cleaning out the gutters, scrubbing the porch. Then the grief is replaced by panic. Where did they go? What happened to Grace? In the distance, the foghorn bellows, sounding like a funeral song. I start, and recall suddenly where I am, in a foreign, hostile city. It is no longer my place. I am not welcome here. The foghorn blows a second, and then a third time. The signal means that all 3 bombs have been successfully dropped. That gives us an hour until they blow, and all hell breaks loose. That gives me only an hour to find her, and I have no idea where to begin. A window bangs shut behind me. I turn just in time to see a white moon worried face looks like Mrs. Hendrickson disappear from view. One thing is obvious, I need to move. I duck my head and continue hurriedly down the road, turning as soon as I see a narrow alley between buildings. I'm moving blindly now, hoping that my feet will carry me in the right direction. Grace, Grace, Grace. I pray that she might somehow hear me. Blindly, across Mellon, toward yet another alley, a black gaping mouth, a place of sideways shadows to conceal me. Grace, where are you? In my head, I'm screaming it, screaming so loudly it swallows up everything else and whites out the sound of the approaching car. And then out of nowhere, it's there, the engine ticking and panting, the window reflecting light in my eyes blinding me, the squealing wheels as the driver tries to stop. Then pain, and a sensation of tumbling. I think I'm going to die. I see the sky revolving above me, I see Alex's face smiling, and then I feel the hard bite of pavement underneath me. The air gets knocked out of me and I roll over onto my back, my lungs stuttering, fighting for air. For a confused moment, watching the blue sky above me, strung taut and high between the roofs of the buildings, I forget where I am. I feel like I'm floating, drifting across a surface of blue water. All I know is I'm not dead. My body is still mine. I twitch my hands and flex my feet just to be sure. Miraculously, I manage to avoid hitting my head. Doors slam. Voices are shouting. I remember that I need to move, I need to get to my feet. Grace. But before I can do anything, hands grab me roughly by the arms, pull me to my feet. Everything is coming to me in flashes. Dark black suits. Guns. Mean faces. Very bad. Instinct takes over, and I begin twisting and kicking. I bite down on the hand of the guard who is gripping me, but he doesn't release me, and another guard steps forward and slaps me in the face. The blow stings and sends a fiery explosion across my vision. I spit blindly at him. Another guard, there are 3 of them, aims his gun at my head. His eyes are as black and cold as cut stone, full of not hatred. Kurds don't hate, and they don't care either, but disgust, as though I am a particularly disgusting brand of insect, and I know then that I will die. I'm sorry, Alex. And Julian too. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Grace. I close my eyes. Wait. I open my eyes. A girl is emerging from the back seat. She is dressed in the white muslin of a new bride. Her hair is elaborately knotted and curled around her head, and her procedural scar has been highlighted with makeup, so it looks like a little colored star just beneath her left ear. She is beautiful. She looks just like the paintings of angels we used to see in church. Then her eyes land on me, and my stomach wrenches. The ground opens underneath me. I can hardly trust myself to stand. Lena, she says calmly. It is more of an announcement than a greeting. I can't bring myself to speak. I can't say her name, even though it screams, echoing through my head. Hana. Where are we going? Hana turns toward me. These are the first words I have managed to say to her. For a second she registers surprise, and something else too. Pleasure. It's hard to tell. Her expressions are different, and I can't read her face anymore. My house, she says after a brief pause. I could laugh out loud. She's so ridiculously calm. She could be inviting me over to surf lamb for music, or curl up on her couch and watch a movie. You're not going to turn me in. My voice is sarcastic. I know she's going to turn me in. I knew it the moment I saw the scar, saw the flatness behind her eyes like a pool that has lost all its depth. Either she doesn't detect the challenge, or she chooses to ignore it. I will, she says simply. But not yet. An expression flickers across her face, a momentary uncertainty, and she seems about to say something else. Instead she turns back to the window, chewing her lower lip. That bothers me, the lip chewing. It is a break in her surface of calm, a ripple I didn't expect. It's the old Hana peeking out of this shiny new version, and it makes my stomach cramp again. I'm overwhelmed by the momentary urge to throw my arms around her, to inhale her smell, 2 dabs of vanilla at the elbows, and jasmine on her neck to tell her how much I've missed her. Just in time she catches me staring at her and presses her mouth firmly into a line. And I remind myself that the old Hana is gone. She probably doesn't even smell the same. She hasn't asked me a single question about what has happened to me, where I've been, how I came to be in Portland, streaked with blood, and wearing dirt-encrusted clothing. She has barely looked at me at all, and when she does, it is with a vague, detached curiosity, as though I'm a strange animal species in a zoo. I'm expecting us to turn toward West End, but instead we head off peninsula. Hana must have moved. The houses here are even larger and statelier than in her old neighborhood. I don't know why I'm surprised. That is one thing I have learned during my time with the resistance. The cure is about control. It's about structure. And the rich get richer and richer, while the poor get squeezed into narrow alleys and cramped apartments, and told they are being protected and promised they will be rewarded in heaven for obedience. Servitude is called safety. We turn onto a street lined with ancient-looking maple trees whose branches embrace overhead to form a canopy. A street sign flashes by, Essex Street. My stomach gives another violent twist. 88 Essex Street is where Pippa has planted the bomb. How long has it been since the foghorn blew? 10 minutes. 15. Sweat is pooling under my arms. I scan the mailboxes as we pass. One of these homes, one of these glorious white houses, crowned like cakes with latticework and cupolas ringed with wide white porches and set back from the street on vivid green lawns, is going to blow in less than an hour. The car slows to a stop in front of ornate iron gates. The driver leans out his window to punch a code into a keypad, and the gates were smoothly open. It reminds me of Julian's old house in New York City and amazes me still, all this power, all this energy flowing and pumping to a handful of people. Hana is still staring impassively out the window, and I have the sudden urge to reach out and drive my fist through her image as it is reflected there. She has no idea what the rest of the world is like. She has never seen hardship or been without food, without heat or comfort. I'm amazed that she could ever have been my best friend. We were always living in two separate worlds. I was just stupid enough to believe it didn't matter. Towering hedges surround the car on both sides, flanking a short drive that leads to another monstrous house. It is larger than any we have seen thus far. An iron number is nailed above the front door. 88. For an instant, my vision goes black. I blink. But the number is still there. 88 Essex Street. The bomb is here. Sweat tickles my lower back. It doesn't make any sense. The other bombs are planted downtown in municipal buildings, like they were last year. You live here, I say to Hana. She is getting out of the car, still with that same infuriating calm, as though we're on a social visit. Once again she hesitates. It's Fred's house, she says. I guess we share it now. When I stare at her, she amends, Fred Hargrove. He's mayor. I had completely forgotten that Hana was paired with Fred Hargrove. We'd heard rumors through the resistance that Hargrove Sr. had been killed during the incidents. Fred must have taken his father's place. Now it begins to make sense that a bomb was planted in his home. Nothing is more symbolic than striking the leader directly. But we've miscalculated, it isn't Fred who will be at home. It's Hana. My mouth feels dry and itchy. One of her goons tries to grab me and force me out of the car, and I wrench away from him. I'm not going to run, I practically spit and slide out of the car on my own. I know I wouldn't get more than 3 feet before they opened fire. I'll have to watch carefully and think and look for an opportunity to escape. No way am I going to be within 3 blocks of this place when it blows. Hana has preceded us up the porch steps. She waits her back to me until one of the guards steps forward and opens the door. I feel a rush of hatred for this brittle, spoiled girl with her spotless white linens and her vast rooms. Inside it's surprisingly dark, full of lots of polished, dark oak and leather. Most of the windows are half obscured by elaborate drapery and velvet curtains. Hana starts to lead me into the living room, and then thinks better of it. She continues down the hall without bothering to switch on the light, turning back only once to look at me with an expression I can't decipher, and finally leads me through 2 swinging doors and into the kitchen. This room, in contrast with the rest of the house, is very bright. Large windows face out over an enormous backyard. The wood here is shaved pine or ash, soft and nearly white, and the counters are spotless white marble. The guards follow us into the room. Hana turns to them. Leave us, she says. Illuminated by the slanted sunlight, which makes it appear as if she is glowing slightly, she once again looks like an angel. I'm struck by her stillness, and by the quietness of the house, its cleanliness and beauty. And somewhere in its underbelly, very deep, a tumor is growing, ticking toward its eventual explosion. The guard who was driving the one who had me in a headlock earlier makes noises of protest, but Hana silences him quickly. I said, leave us. For a second, the old Hana resurges. I see the defiance in her eyes, the imperial tilt of her chin. And close the doors behind you. The guards file out reluctantly. I can feel the weight of their stares, and I know that if Hana were not here, I would already be dead. But I refuse to feel grateful to her. I won't. When they are gone, Hana stares at me for a minute in silence. Her expression is unreadable. Finally she says, you're too skinny. I could almost laugh. Yeah, well. The restaurants in the wilds are mostly closed. They're mostly bombed actually. I don't bother keeping the edge out of my voice. She doesn't react. She just keeps watching me. Another beat of silence passes. Then she gestures to the table. Sit down. I'd rather stand, thanks. Hana frowns. You can treat that as an order. I don't really think that she'll call the guards back if I refuse to sit, but there's no point in risking it. I slide into a chair, glaring at her the whole time. But I can't get comfortable. It has been 20 minutes at least since the foghorn blew. That means I have less than 40 minutes to get out of here. As soon as I sit, Hana whirls around and disappears into the back of the kitchen, where a dark gap beyond the refrigerator indicates a pantry. Before I can think of escape, she reemerges, carrying a loaf of bread wrapped in a tea towel. She stands at the counter and slices off thick hunks, slathering them in butter and piling them high onto a plate. Then she moves to the sink and wets the tea towel. Watching her turn on the faucet, watching the steaming water that appears instantly, I am filled with envy. It has been forever since I've had a proper shower or gotten to clean myself except in frigid rivers. Here. She passes me the hot towel. You're a mess. I didn't have time to do my makeup, I reply sarcastically. But I take the towel anyway and touch it gingerly to my ear. I've stopped bleeding at least, although the towel comes back flecked with dried blood. I keep my eyes on her as I wipe off my face and hands. I wonder what she is thinking. She slides the plate of bread in front of me when I've finished with the towel, and fills a glass with water along with real ice cubes, 5 of them rattling joyfully together. Eat, she says. Drink. I'm not hungry, I lie. She rolls her eyes and once again I see the old Hana float up into this new imposter. Don't be stupid. Of course you're hungry. You're starving. You're probably dying of thirst too. Why are you doing this? I ask her. Hana opens her mouth and then closes it again. We were friends, she says. Were, I say firmly. Now we're enemies. Are we? Hana looks startled, as though the idea has never occurred to her. Once again, I feel a flicker of unease, a squirming feeling of guilt. Something isn't right. I force the feelings down. Of course, I say. Hana watches me for a second more. Then, abruptly, she gets up from the table and moves over to the windows. Once her back is to me, I quickly take a piece of bread and stuff it in my mouth, eating as quickly as I can without choking. I wash it down with a long slug of water, so cold it brings a blazing, delicious pain to my head. For a long time, Hana doesn't say anything. I eat another piece of bread. She can no doubt hear me chewing, but she doesn't comment on it or turn around. She allows me to keep up the pretense that I am not eating, and I experience a brief burst of gratitude. I'm sorry about Alex, she says at last, still without turning. My stomach gives an uncomfortable twist. Too much. Too quickly. He didn't die. My voice sounds overloud. I don't know why I feel the urge to tell her. But I need her to know that her side, her people, didn't win, at least not in this case. Even though of course in some ways they did. She turns around. What? He didn't die, I repeat. He was thrown into the crypts. Hana flinches as though I've reached out and slapped her. She sucks her lower lip into her mouth again and starts chewing. She stops herself, frowning a little. What? I know that face. I recognize it. She knows something. What is it? Nothing. She shakes her head as though to dislodge an idea there. I thought I saw him. My stomach surges into my throat. Where? Here. She looks at me with another one of her inscrutable expressions. The new Hana is much harder to read than the old one. Last night. But if he's in the crypts. He's not. He escaped. Hana, the light, the kitchen, even the bomb ticking quietly underneath us, moving us slowly toward oblivion, suddenly seem far away. As soon as Hana suggests it, I see that it makes sense. Alex was all alone. He would have gone back to familiar territory. Alex could be here somewhere in Portland. Close. Maybe there's hope after all. If I can only get out of here. So. I push up from the chair. Are you going to call the regulators, or what? Even as I'm talking, I'm planning. I could probably take her down if it comes to it, but the idea of attacking her makes me uneasy. And she'll no doubt put up a fight. By the time I get the better of her, the guards will be on top of us. But if I can get her out of the kitchen for even a few seconds, I'll put the chair through the window, cut through the garden, try to lose the guards in the trees. The garden probably backs up onto another street. If not, I'll have to loop around to Essex. It's a long shot, but it's a chance. Hana watches me steadily. The clock above the stove seems to be moving at record speed, and I imagine the timer on the bomb ticking forward as well. I want to apologize to you, she says calmly. Oh yeah. For what? I don't have time for this. We don't have time for this. I push away thoughts of what will happen to Hana even if I manage to escape. She'll be here in the house. My stomach is clenching and unclenching. I'm worried the bread will come straight back up. I have to stay focused. What happens to Hana isn't my concern, and it isn't my fault, either. For telling the regulators about 37 Brooks, she says. For telling them about you and Alex. Just like that, my brain powers down. What? I told them. She lets out a tiny exhalation, as though saying the words has given her relief. I'm sorry. I was jealous. I can't speak. I'm swimming through a fog. Jealous. I managed to spit out. I wanted what you had with Alex. I was confused. I didn't understand what I was doing. She shakes her head again. I have a swinging, seasick feeling. It doesn't make any sense. Hana, golden girl Hana, my best friend, fearless and reckless. I trusted her. I loved her. You were my best friend. I know. Again she looks troubled, as though trying to recall the meaning of the words. You had everything. I can't stop my voice from rising. The anger is vibrating, ripping through me like a live current. Perfect life. Perfect grades. Everything. I gesture to the spotless kitchen, to the sunshine pouring over the marble counters like drizzled butter. I had nothing. He was my one thing. My only. The sickness surges up and I take a step forward, clenching my fists, blind with rage. Why couldn't you let me have it? Why did you have to take it? Why did you always take everything? I told you I was sorry, Hana says again mechanically. I could shriek with laughter. I could cry, or tear her eyes out. Instead I reach out and slap her. The current flows down into my hand, into my arm, before I know what I am doing. The noise is unexpectedly loud, and for a moment I'm sure the guards will burst through the door. But no one comes. Instantly, Hana's face begins to redden. But she doesn't cry out. She doesn't make a sound. In the silence, I can hear my own breathing, ragged and desperate. I feel tears pushing at the back of my eyes. I'm ashamed and angry and sick all at once. Hana turns slowly back to face me. She almost looks sad. I deserve that, she says. Suddenly I am overcome with exhaustion. I am tired of fighting, of hitting and being hit. This is the strange way of the world, that people who simply want to love are instead forced to become warriors. It's the upside-down nature of life. It's all I can do not to collapse into a chair again. I felt terrible afterward, Hana says in a voice hardly above a whisper. You should know that. That's why I helped you escape. I felt. Hana searches for the right word. Remorse. What about now? I ask her. Hana lifts a shoulder. Now I'm cured, she says. It's different. Different how? For a split second, I wish more than anything, more than breathing, that I had stayed here, with her, that I had let the knife fall. I feel freer, she says. Whatever I was expecting her to say, it isn't this. She must sense that I'm surprised, because she goes on. Everything's kind of muffled. Like hearing sounds underwater. I don't have to feel things for other people so much. One side of her mouth quirks into a smile. Maybe, like you said, I never did. My head has started to ache. Over. It's all over. I just want to curl up in a ball and go to sleep. I didn't mean that. You did. Feel things, I mean, for other people. You used to. I'm not sure she hears me. She says, almost as an afterthought, I don't have to listen to anybody anymore. Something in her tone is off, triumphant, almost. When I look at her, she smiles. I wonder whether she's thinking of anyone in particular. There is the sound of a door opening and closing, and the bark of a man's voice. Hana's whole face changes. She gets serious again in an instant. Fred, she says. She crosses quickly to the swinging doors behind me and pokes her head into the hall tentatively. Then she whirls around to face me, suddenly breathless. Come on, she says. Quick, while he's in the study. Come on, where? I say. Hana looks momentarily irritated. The back door leads onto the porch. From there you can cut through the garden and onto Dennett. That will take you back to Brighton. Quickly, she adds. If he sees you, he'll kill you. I'm so shocked that for a moment I just stand there, gaping at her. Why? I say. Why are you helping me? Hana smiles again, but her eyes stay cloudy and unreadable. You said it yourself. I was your best friend. All at once my energy returns. She's going to let me go. Before she can change her mind, I move toward her. She presses her back against one of the swinging doors, keeping it open for me, poking her head into the hall every few seconds to make sure the coast is clear. Just as I am about to scoot past her, I stop. Jasmine and vanilla. She still wears it after all. She does smell the same. Hana, I say. I'm standing so close to her, I can see the gold threaded through the blue of her eyes. I lick my lips. There's a bomb. She jerks back a fraction of an inch. What? I don't have time to regret what I'm saying. Here. Somewhere in the house. Get out of here, okay? Get yourself out. She'll take Fred, too, and the explosion will be a failure, but I don't care. I loved Hana once, and she is helping me now. I owe this to her. Once again, her expression is unreadable. How much time? She asks abruptly. I shake my head. 10, 15 minutes tops. She nods to show that she has understood. I move past her, into the darkness of the hallway. She stays where she is, pressed against the swinging doors, rigid as a statue. She lifts her chin toward the back door. Just as I'm placing a hand on a door handle, she calls to me in a whisper. I almost forgot. She moves toward me, her dress rustling, and for a moment I am struck by the impression that she is a ghost. Grace is in the Highlands. 31 Winwood Road. They're living there now. I stare at her. Somewhere, deep inside this stranger, my best friend is buried. Hana, I start to say. She cuts me off. Don't thank me, she says in a low voice. Just go. Impulsively, without thinking about what I am doing, I reach out and seize her hand. 2 long pulses, 2 short ones. Our old signal. Hana looks startled. Then, slowly, her face relaxes. For just 1 second, she shines as though lit up by a torch from within. I remember. She whispers. A door slams somewhere. Hana wrenches away, looking suddenly afraid. She pivots me around and pushes me toward the door. Go, she says, and I do. I don't look back. Hana. I have counted 33 seconds on the clock when Fred bursts into the kitchen, red-faced. Where is she? His armpits are wet with sweat, and his hair so carefully combed and gelled at the ceremony is a mess. I'm tempted to ask him who he means, but I know it will only infuriate him. Escaped, I say. What do you mean? Marcus told me. She hit me, I say. I hope that Lena left a mark when she slapped me. I cracked my head on the wall. She ran. Shit. Fred rakes a hand through his hair, steps out into the hall, and bellows for the guards. Then he turns back to me. Why the hell didn't you let Marcus take care of it? Why were you alone with her in the first place? I wanted information, I say. I thought she was more likely to give it to me alone. Shit, Fred says again. The more worked up he gets, strangely, the calmer I feel. What's going on, Fred? He kicks a chair suddenly, sending it skittering across the kitchen. Goddamn chaos, that's what's going on. He can't stop moving. He clenches his fist, and for a moment, I think he might go for me, just to have something to punch. There must be 1,000 people rioting. Some of them invalids. Some of them just kids. Stupid, stupid. If they knew. He breaks off as his guards come jogging down the hall. She let the girl get away, Fred says, without giving them a chance to ask what's wrong. The scorn in his voice is obvious. She hit me, I repeat again. I can feel Marcus staring at me. I deliberately avoid his eyes. He can't possibly know that I let Lena escape. I gave no indication that I knew her. I was careful not to look at her in the car. When Marcus's eyes pass back to Fred, I allow myself to exhale. What do you want us to do? Marcus asks. I don't know. Fred rubs his forehead. I need to think. Goddamn. I need to think. The girl bragged about reinforcements on Essex, I say. She said there was an invalid posted at every house on the street. Shit. Fred stands still for a moment, staring out at the backyard. Then he rolls his shoulders back. All right. I'll call down to 111 for reinforcements. In the meantime, get out there and start combing the streets. Look for movement in the trees. Let's rout as many of these little shits as we can. I'll be right behind you. Got it. Marcus and Bill disappear into the hall. Fred picks up the phone. I put a hand on his arm. He turns to me, annoyed, and hangs up. What do you want? He practically spits. Don't go out there, Fred, I say. Please. The girl said the others were armed. She said they'd open fire if you so much as put your head out the door. I'll be fine. He jerks away from me. Please, I repeat. I close my eyes and think a brief prayer to God. I'm sorry. It's not worth it, Fred. We need you. Stay inside. Let the police do their jobs. Promise me you won't leave the house. A muscle flexes in his jaw. A long moment passes. At every second, I keep expecting the blast, a tornado of wooden shrapnel, a roaring tunnel of fire. I wonder if it will hurt. God forgive me for I have sinned. All right, Fred says at last. I promise. He lifts up the receiver again. Just stay out of the way. I don't want you screwing anything up. I'll be upstairs, I tell him. He has already turned his back to me. I pass into the hall, letting the swinging doors close behind me. I can hear the muffled sound of his voice through the wood. Any minute now, the inferno. I think about going upstairs, into what would have been my room. I could lie down and close my eyes. I'm almost tired enough to sleep. But instead I use the back door open, cross the porch, and go down into the garden, being careful to stay out of sight of the large kitchen windows. The air smells like spring, like wet earth and new growth. Birds call in the trees. Wet grass clings to my ankles and dirties the hem of my wedding dress. The trees enfold me, and then I can no longer see the house. I will not stay to watch it burn. Lena. The highlands are burning. I smell the fire well before I get there, and when I'm still a quarter mile away, I can see the smudge of smoke above the trees and flames licking up from the old weather-beaten roofs. On Harmon Road, I spotted an open garage and a rusted bike mounted on the wall like a hunter's trophy. Even though the bike is a piece of crap, and the gears groan and protest whenever I try to adjust them, it's better than nothing. I actually don't mind the noise, the rattling of the chains or the hard ringing of the wind in my ears. It keeps me from thinking of Hana, and from trying to understand what happened. It drowns out her voice in my head saying go. It doesn't drown out the blast though, or the sirens that follow afterward. I can hear them even when I have made it almost all the way to the highlands, cresting like screams. I hope she got out. I say a prayer that she did, although I no longer know who I'm praying to. And then I'm in the highlands, and I can think only of grace. The first thing I see is the fire, which is leaping from house to house, from tree to roof to wall. Whoever set the fire did it deliberately, systematically. The first group of invalids breached the fence not far from here. This must be the work of regulators. The second thing I notice is the people running through the trees, bodies indistinct in the smoke. This startles me. When I lived in Portland, Deering Highlands was deserted, cleared out after accusations of the disease made it a wasteland. I haven't had time to think about what it means that Grace and my aunt are living here now, or consider that others might have made their home here as well. I try to pick out familiar faces as they blur past me, darting through the trees shouting. I can't see anything but form and color, people holding bundles of their belongings in their arms. Children are wailing, and my heart stops. Any one of them could be Grace. Little Grace, who barely made a sound, she could be shrieking in the half-dark somewhere. A hot, electric feeling is pulsing through me, as though the flames have made their way into my blood. I'm trying to remember the layout of the highlands, but my mind is full of static. An image of 37 brooks of the blanket in the garden, and the trees lit gold by the dipping sun, keeps playing there. I hit Edgewood and know I've gone too far. I turn around, coughing, and retrace my path. The air is full of cracking, thunderbolt crashes, whole houses are engulfed, standing like shivering ghosts, burning white hot, doors gaping, skin melting from flesh. Please, please, please. The word drills through my head. Please. Then I spot the sign for Wynwood Road, a short 3-block street fortunately. Here the fire has not spread so far and remains caught up in the tangled canopy of trees, and skating over the roofs, an ever-growing crown of white and orange. By now, the people in the trees have thinned, but I keep thinking I hear children crying, ghostly, wailing echoes. I'm sweating, and my eyes are burning. When I ditch the bike, I struggle to catch my breath. I bring my shirt to my face and try to breathe through it as I jog down the street. Half the houses don't have any visible numbers. I know that in all probability, Grace has fled. I hope she was one of the people I saw moving through the trees, but I can't shake the fear that she might be trapped somewhere, that Aunt Carol and Uncle William and Jenny might have left her behind. She was always curling up in corners and hiding in hidden recess spaces, trying to make herself as invisible as possible. A faded mailbox indicates number 31, a sad, sagging house, smoke churning out of its upper windows, flames licking across its weather-beaten roof. Then I see her, or at least, I think I do. Just for a second, I swear I see her face, pale as a flame, in one of the windows. But before I can call out, she vanishes. I take a deep breath and dart across the lawn and up the half-rotted steps. I stop just inside the front door, momentarily dizzy. I recognize the furniture, the faded striped couch, the rug with its singed tassels, and the stain on the old red crow pillows where Jenny spilled her grape juice, still barely visible from my old house, Aunt Carol's place on Cumberland. I feel as though I've stumbled directly into the past, but a warped past, a past that smells like smoke and wet wallpaper with rooms that have been distorted. I go from room to room, calling out to Grace, checking behind furniture and in the closets of several rooms that are totally vacant. This house is much larger than our old one, and there is not nearly enough stuff to fill it. She is gone. Maybe she was never here, maybe I only imagined her face. Upstairs is black with smoke. I can only make it halfway to the landing when I am forced back downstairs, heaving and coughing. Now the front rooms too are on fire. Cheap shower curtains are tacked to the windows. They go up in one lick, letting off the stink of plastic. I back into the kitchen, feeling like a giant has its fist around my chest, needing to get out, needing to breathe. I heave my shoulder into the back door, swollen with heat. It resists and finally go stumbling into the backyard, coughing, eyes watering. I'm not thinking anymore. My feet are moving me automatically away from the fire, toward clean air, away, when I feel a shooting pain in my foot and I am falling. I hit the ground and look back to see what has tripped me, a door handle, a cellar, half obscured by the long grass on either side of it. I don't know what makes me reach back and wrench open the door, instinct, maybe, or superstition. A set of steep wood stairs runs down to a small underground cellar, roughly hacked out of the earth. The tiny room is fitted with shelves and stocked with cans of food. Several glass bottles, soda, maybe, are lined up on the ground. She's squeezed so far into a corner, I almost miss her. Luckily, before I can close the door again, she shifts, and one of her sneakers comes into view illuminated in the smoky red light pouring in from above. The shoes are new, but I recognize the purple laces, which she colored in herself. Grace. My voice is hoarse. I ease down onto the top step. As my eyes adjust to the dimness, Grace floats into focus taller than she was 8 months ago, thinner and dirtier too, crouched in the corner staring at me with wild, terrified eyes. Grace, it's me. I reach out to her, but she doesn't move. I ease myself down a step farther, reluctant to go into the cellar and try to grab her. She was always fast. I'm afraid she'll duck and run. My heart is throbbing painfully in my throat, and my mouth tastes like smoke. There's a sharp, pungent smell in the cellar I can't identify. I focus on Grace, on getting her to move. It's me, Grace, I try again. I can only imagine what I must look like to her, how changed I must appear. It's Lena. Your cousin Lena. She stiffens as though I've reached out and shocked her. Lena. She whispers, her voice odd. But still she doesn't move. Above us, there is a thunderous crash. A tree branch, or a piece of the roof. I have a sudden terror that we will be buried in here if we don't move now. The house will collapse, we'll be trapped. Come on, Gracie, I say, invoking an old nickname. The back of my neck is sweaty. We've got to go, okay. At last Grace moves. She strikes out clumsily with a foot, and I hear the tinkle of glass breaking. The smell intensifies, burning the inside of my nostrils, and suddenly I place it. Gas. I didn't mean to, Grace says, her voice high-pitched shrill with panic. She is crouching now, and I watch a dark stain of liquid spread on the packed dirt floor around her. The terror is huge now, it presses me from all sides. Grace, come on, sweetie. I try to keep the panic from my voice. Come take my hand. I didn't mean to. She starts to cry. I scuttle down the last few steps and grab her, heaving her up onto my waist. She is awkward, too big for me to carry comfortably, but surprisingly light. She wraps her legs around my waist. I can feel her ribs and the sharp points of her hip bones. Her hair smells like grease and oil and faintly, just faintly like dish soap. Up the stairs and into the world of flame and fire, air turned watery, shimmering with heat, as though the world is breaking apart into a mirage. It would be faster to set Grace down and let her run next to me, but now that I have her, now that she is here clinging to me, her heart beating frantically in her chest, pounding its rhythm into mine, I won't let her go. The bike is where I left it, thank God. Grace maneuvers clumsily onto the seat, and I squeeze on behind her. I shove off down the street, my legs heavy as stone, until momentum begins to carry us. And then I ride, as fast as I can, away from the fingers of smoke and flame, leaving the highlands to burn. Hana. I walk without paying attention to where I am, or where I am going. One foot in front of the other, my white shoes slapping quietly against the pavement. In the distance, I can hear the roar of shouting voices. The sun is bright, and feels nice on my shoulders. A breeze lifts the trees silently, and they bow and wave as I pass. One foot, and then another foot. It's so simple. The sun is so bright. What will happen to me? I don't know. Maybe I will come across someone who recognizes me. Maybe I will be brought back to my parents. Maybe, if the world doesn't end, if Fred is now dead, I will be paired with someone else. Or maybe I will keep walking until I reach the end of the world. Maybe. But for now there is only the high white sun, and the sky, and tendrils of gray smoke and voices that sound like ocean waves in the distance. There is the slapping of my shoes and the trees that seem to nod and tell me, you're okay. Everything will be okay. Maybe, after all, they are right. Lena. As we get close to Back Cove, the trickle of people swells to a roaring, rushing stream, and I can barely maneuver my bike between them. They are running, shouting, waving hammers and knives and pieces of metal piping, surging toward some unknown location, and I'm surprised to see that it isn't just invalids rioting anymore, it is kids too, some as young as 12 and 13, uncured and angry. I even spot a few cureds watching from their windows above the street, occasionally waving a show of solidarity. I break loose of the crowd and bump the bike onto the churned mud shores of the cove where Alex and I made our stand a lifetime ago, where for the first time he traded his happiness for mine. Grass grows high between the rubble of the old road, and people injured or dead are lying in the grass, letting out moans or staring sightlessly at the cloudless sky. I see several bodies face down in the shallows of the cove, and tendrils of red sweeping across the surface of the water. Past the cove at the wall, the crowd is still thick, but it looks like mostly our people. The regulators and police must have been driven back farther toward Old Port. Now thousands of rioters are flowing in that direction, their voices unified, a single note of fury. I ditch the bike in the shade of a large juniper and, at last, take Grace by the shoulders, examine her all over for cuts or bruises. She is shaking, wide-eyed, staring at me as though she believes I'll disappear any second. What happened to the others? I ask. Her fingernails are coated with dirt, and she is skinny. But otherwise, she looks okay. More than okay, she looks beautiful. I feel a sob building in my throat and I swallow it back. We aren't safe, not yet. Grace shakes her head. I don't know. There was a fire and I hid. So they did leave her. Or they didn't care enough to look when she disappeared. I feel a wave of nausea. You look different, Grace says quietly. You got taller, I say. Suddenly I could shout for joy. I could scream with happiness while the whole world burns. Where did you go? Grace asks me. What happened to you? I'll tell you all about it later. I take her chin with one hand. Listen, Grace. I want to tell you how sorry I am. I'm sorry for leaving you behind. I'll never leave you again, okay? Her eyes travel my face. She nods. I'm going to keep you safe now. I push the words out past the thickness in my throat. Do you believe me? She nods again. I pull her to me, squeezing. She feels so thin, so fragile. But I know that she is strong. She always has been. She will be ready for whatever comes next. Take my hand, I tell her. I'm not certain where to go, and my mind flashes to Raven. Then I remember that she is gone, murdered at the wall, and the sickness threatens to overwhelm me again. But I have to stay calm for Grace's sake. I need to find a safe place to go with Grace until the fighting is done. My mother will help me. She'll know what to do. Grace's grip is surprisingly strong. We pick our way along the shoreline, threading between the people, invalids and regulators alike, injured, dying, and dead. At the top of the slope, Colin, limping, leans heavily on another boy and makes his way to an empty spot on the grass. The other boy looks up, and my heart stops. Alex. He sees me almost immediately after I've spotted him. I want to call out to him, but my voice is caught in my throat. For a second, he hesitates. Then he eases Colin down into the grass and bends to say something to him. Colin nods, gripping his knee, wincing. Then Alex is jogging toward me. Alex. It's as though saying his name makes him real. He stops a few inches away from me, and his eyes go to Grace, and then back to me. This is Grace, I say, tugging her hand. She hangs back, angling her body behind mine. I remember, he says. There is no more hardness in his eyes, no more hatred. He clears his throat. I thought I'd never see you again. Here I am. The sun feels overly bright, and all of a sudden I can think of nothing to say, no words to describe everything I've got and wished and wondered. I got your note. He nods. His mouth tightens just a little. Is Julian? I don't know where Julian is, I say, and then instantly feel guilty. I think of his blue eyes, and his warmth curling around me when I slept. I hope he has not been hurt. I bend down so I can look Grace in the eyes. Sit here for a minute, okay, Gracie. She folds herself to the ground obediently. I can't bring myself to step more than 2 paces away from her. Alex follows. I lower my voice so Grace won't hear us. Is it true? I ask him. Is what true? His eyes are the color of honey. These are the eyes I remember from my dreams. That you still love me, I say, breathless. I need to know. Alex nods. He reaches out and touches my face, barely skimming my cheekbone and brushing away a bit of my hair. It's true. But I've changed, I say. And you've changed. That's true too, he says quietly. I look at the scar on his face, stretching from his left eye to his jawline, and something hitches in my chest. So what now? I ask him. The light is too bright. The day feels as though it's merging into dream. Do you love me? Alex asks. And I could cry. I could press my face into his chest and breathe in and pretend that nothing has changed, that everything will be perfect and whole and healed again. But I can't. I know I can't. I never stop. I look away from him. I look at Grace, and the high grass littered with the wounded and the dead. I think of Julian and his clear blue eyes, his patience and goodness. I think of all the fighting we've done, and all the fighting we have yet to do. I take a deep breath. But it's more complicated than that. Alex reaches out and places his hands on my shoulders. I'm not going to run away again, he says. I don't want you to, I tell him. His fingers find my cheek and I rest for a second against his palm, letting the pain of the past few months flow out of me, letting him turn my head toward his. Then he bends down and kisses me, light and perfect, his lips just barely meeting mine, a kiss that promises renewal. Lena. I step away from Alex when Grace shouts. She has climbed to her feet and is pointing toward the border wall, bouncing excitedly on her toes, full of energy. I turn to look. For a second, tears break apart my vision, turn the world to a kaleidoscope of colors, color crawling up the wall, making a mosaic of the concrete. No. Not color people. People are surging toward the wall. More than that, they are tearing it down. Yelling, wild and triumphant, brandishing hammers and bits of the ruined scaffolding, or picking with their bare hands, they are dismantling the wall piece by piece, breaking the boundaries of the world as we know it. Joy surges inside me. Grace begins to run. She, too, is pulled toward the wall. Grace, wait. I start to follow her, and Alex grabs my hand. I'll find you, he says, watching me with the eyes I remember. I won't let you go again. I don't trust myself to speak. Instead, I nod, hoping that he understands me. He squeezes my hand. Go, he says. So I do. Grace has paused to wait for me, and I take her thin little hand in mine, and soon I find that we are running through the sun and the lingering smoke through the grass on the shores that have become a graveyard, while the sun continues its indifferent rotation and the water reflects nothing but sky. As we approach the wall, I spot Hunter and Bram, standing side by side, sweating and brown, swinging at the concrete with large pieces of metal piping. I see Pipit standing on a portion of the wall that remains, waving a vivid green shirt like a flag. I see Coral. Fierce and beautiful, she passes in and out of view as the crowd surges and shifts around her. Several feet away, my mother works with a hammer, swinging easily and gracefully, making it look like a dance. This hard and muscled woman I hardly know, a woman I have loved my whole life. She is alive. We are alive. She will get to meet Grace. I see Julian too. He is shirtless, sweating, balancing on a heap of rubble, working the butt of a rifle against the wall, so that it splinters and sends a fine spray of white dust onto the people beneath him. The sun makes his hair blaze like a ring of pale fire, touches his shoulders with white wings. For a second, I feel a sense of overwhelming grief for how things change, for the fact that we can never go back. I'm not certain of anything anymore. I don't know what will happen to me, to Alex, and to Julian, to any of us. Come on, Lena. Grace is tugging at my hand. But it's not about knowing. It is simply about going forward. The Curads want to know. We have chosen faith instead. I asked Grace to trust me. We will have to trust too that the world won't end, that tomorrow will come, and that truth will come too. An old line, a forbidden line from a text Raven once showed me, comes back to me now. He who jumps may fall, but he may also fly. It's time to jump. Let's go, I say to Grace, and let her lead me into the surge of people, keeping a tight hold on her hand the whole time. We push into the shouting, joyful throng, and fight our way up toward the wall. Grace scrabbles up a pile of broken down wood and shards of shattered concrete, and I follow clumsily until I am balancing next to her. She is shouting louder than I have ever heard her, a babble language of joy and freedom, and I find that I join in with her as together we begin to tear at chunks of concrete with our fingernails, watching the border dissolve, watching a new world emerge beyond it. Take down the walls. That is, after all, the whole point. You do not know what will happen if you take down the walls. You cannot see through to the other side, don't know whether it will bring freedom or ruin, resolution or chaos. It might be paradise or destruction. Take down the walls. Otherwise you must live closely, in fear, building barricades against the unknown, saying prayers against the darkness, speaking verse of terror and tightness. Otherwise you may never know hell. But you will not find heaven either. You will not know fresh air and flying. All of you, wherever you are in your spiny cities, or your one-bump towns. Find it, the hard stuff, the links of metal and chink, the fragments of stone filling your stomach. And pull, and pull, and pull. I will make a pact with you, I will do it if you will do it, always and forever. Take down the walls.